Shocking encounter, cops discover their incredible boss is a black woman, lives are transformed. Jake Miller, a 36-year-old officer with the small-town police force, stood in the crowded town hall, tension swirling around him like a storm. He had grown up with the badge in his blood, a legacy spanning generations. But today felt different. The new chief of police wasn't just any leader. Angela, a black woman with fierce determination and a vision for change, was about to shake the very foundation of their department and his beliefs. As Angela stepped up to the podium, the murmurs in the room died. Her presence was electric. She had an aura of strength and compassion that drew everyone's attention. "We're here to serve our community, not just to uphold the law," she proclaimed, tearing down the walls of polite indifference that had plagued the department. But when a racially charged incident exploded in the community, a beloved local family harassed because of their ethnicity, Jake felt the walls closing in. The room buzzed with the palpable energy of betrayal and fear. Officers in uniform exchanged heated glances, their confidence faltering. It was his colleagues' discomfort that unsettled him the most. The traditional bonds of masculinity and loyalty began to crack under the weight of social justice. "Why should we protect them?" one officer scoffed, clenching his jaw. People in the audience gasped, others muttered, faces tense. Jake's heart raced. He felt an uncomfortable mix of indignation and confusion. Looking at Angela, he witnessed her fierce integrity. She was fighting a battle for respect, honor, and fairness. The flicker of admiration sparked within him, but it was tinged with resentment toward how fast the ground was shifting beneath his feet. As Angela fought valiantly for the family at the center of the controversy, Jake found himself at a crossroads. He remembered the woman at the grocery store, struggling to feed her small children, her face reflecting desperation. It hit him. This was the community he had vowed to protect, truly protect, not just in a uniform but as a human being. His rigid views begged reevaluation, but a voice in his head screamed for tradition. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. As pain and anger rippled through the room, Angela called for a team meeting. "Unity and compassion, we can't heal our community without them." Her voice was a high note that resonated deep within Jake's heart. He saw the vulnerability in his colleagues' eyes, the masking of insecurities and fear. Could they change? Could he? The guilt of feeling so lost was tightening his chest. A loud bang shattered the room when a local protester barged in, fiery-eyed and fulminating against the officers. The unease smothered Jake, and he felt the weight of history all around him. This was it. The town was on edge, and as emotions boiled over, Jake was poised to speak. Every fiber of his being screamed for transformation, but would they stand together? Could they rise above their ingrained biases? The room held its breath, filled with despair yet somehow whispering hope. Jake stood at the precipice, ready to challenge not just his colleagues but the fabric of their very existence. Jake took a deep breath, sensing the moment hanging in the air like a fragile thread. "Enough!" he finally shouted, the word cutting through the tension like a knife. Heads turned, eyes wide with surprise. He felt a rush of adrenaline surge through him, a strange mix of terror and clarity. In that instant it was as if the panic morphed into a calm certainty. "Enough of the old way," he continued, his voice steady despite the shaking in his chest. "I joined this force to protect everyone, not just those who look like me or think like me. We're better than this." The room fell silent, like a pause before a storm. His fellow officers shifted uneasily, but there was a pulse of something else: curiosity. Hope. Angela's eyes narrowed, studying him with an intensity that made Jake feel exposed yet invigorated. She stepped forward slowly, leaning towards him. "Thank you, Jake. But it's not just about words, it's about action. We need to show our community we are all in this together. Her voice had an edge of urgency that felt infectious. He could see the fire in her eyes. And how do we do that? A younger officer, Maria, piped up. She was green but eager, and her question hung in the air as others nodded in agreement. Angela began to outline her vision: community workshops, outreach programs, and partnerships with local organizations that advocated for diversity and inclusion. She spoke with passion about rebuilding trust not just among them but with their community. As she outlined each point, Jake felt the grip of skepticism loosening just a little. Each word she spoke felt like a step toward connectedness. There were murmurs, both supportive and skeptical, peppering the room. Jake looked around at the faces of his colleagues. Some were nodding, others looked lost, a few still wore expressions of disbelief. Each reaction tugged at something deep inside him. He was beginning to realize that transformation wasn't going to be easy, but neither was it impossible. Jake raised his hand again, and this time he felt an unwavering resolve. "I want to volunteer for the outreach program," he declared. "I'll help organize the workshops, I'll talk to the families. I want to show that we can change." The room fell silent, eyes darting between him and Angela, unsure of what to do next. Then, slowly, others began to voice their agreement. It was quiet at first but built to a chorus of support, each officer stepping forward to offer their help. Anger was still present, but it was overshadowed by a collective yearning for a deeper connection with their town and its people. Jake felt the weight of history shift, a small crack forming in the walls of tradition that had once defined him. As they began discussing ideas and roles, Jake's nerves settled into anticipation. They could be part of something bigger than themselves. His heart soared with hope, but beneath it lingered a thread of worry. Could they actually do this? He glanced at Angela, who smiled back at him, as if sensing the monumental step they were taking together, but before they could dive deeper, the door flew open again. This time, it was one of the victims from the incident, a mother holding her child, her face a mixture of fear and courage. "I heard there's going to be an outreach that you want to help?" she asked hesitantly. The room collectively held its breath, waiting for answers. Would they stand firm, face to face with the truth of their actions? Jake's heart raced again. The moment hung, ripe with potential. Change was standing at the door. But would they open it? Jake's breath caught in his throat as he took in the scene. The mother stood there, trembling yet defiant, her child clutching her leg with wide, uncertain eyes. The air buzzed with tension, every officer in the room processing the undeniable weight of her presence. This was real. This wasn't just a topic of conversation anymore. Angela stepped forward, her voice soothing yet firm. "Yes, we want to help," she replied, determination wrapped in kindness. "Can we talk about what has happened, about your experience? It's important to us that your voice is heard." The woman hesitated, glancing back at the child who seemed to sense her anxiety. Jake saw the moment her resolve solidified. She took a step closer, her voice trembling slightly. "You don't know what it's like what we go through," she whispered, but there was fire behind her words. "You might think you can change things, but can you really? Last time, we were afraid." Each word pierced the room like an arrow, and Jake could feel the collective guilt wash over them, stinging yet necessary. He shifted his weight, feeling the urge to speak, to reassure her somehow. "We know we've made mistakes," he began, his voice steady. "That's why we want to change. We want to show you we can be different. We want to listen." With a nod from Angela, Jake moved closer, allowing the vulnerability between them to fade the distance. He could see her fighting against her hurt, and it struck a chord deep within him. "Your experiences matter. We want to learn how to do better." She met his gaze, and he could see a flicker of hope ignite in her eyes. "You understand what the word trust means. But it's not something you can just say. You need to earn it." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, as officers nodded, their expressions a mixture of shame and understanding. They were standing at a precipice, teetering between the familiar comfort of ignorance and the unsettling honesty of growth. "Let us start by opening a dialogue," Angela suggested. "We want to create a space where people aren't too scared to voice their worries, a place where we can all rebuild what has been lost." Jake turned to his colleagues, and he could sense a collective resolve forming. They had the chance to make right, to transform fear into understanding. Would it be uncomfortable? Absolutely. But each silent nod from his fellow officers echoed that they were ready to engage in this uncomfortable truth. The mother looked around, her eyes meeting each of theirs, and for the first time, Jake saw a shimmer of hope reflected back at them. "If you're serious, we'll need to get our stories out. People need to hear what I have to say, and more importantly, they need to see that you're not just men in uniforms." The room brightened slightly, a shared energy extending outward. Jake felt the walls of fear lowering, allowing hope to seep in. But as each officer began discussing what steps they could take, the mother's child tugged at her shirt, breaking the growing intensity in the room. "Mama, can we go home now?" the little voice asked, innocent yet powerful. With a heart full of new possibilities, Jake realized this wasn't the end of their journey, it was just the beginning. "We're listening," he called out gently. "And we'll be here, ready to make things right." Yet, as the weight of responsibility settled over him, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they were still balancing on the edge. What would it take to build that trust? And as they began discussing steps, another door opened, shattering the moment with the news of a confrontation brewing in the streets. Would they act in time? Jake's heart raced as his mind flickered back to the weight of the mother's words. The abrupt announcement from the hallway cut through the room like a knife. He turned to look at Angela, whose expression mirrored his concern. "Sirens are going off just a couple blocks down," one officer blurted, his voice cutting through the tension. "Looks like things could get ugly." Angela stepped back, frustration flickering across her face. "This is exactly what we're trying to prevent. We need to be out there. We need to stand with the people." A fire ignited within Jake. They had just started to open a dialogue, and now it felt like everything was about to crash down around them. He glanced back at the mother, who still stood rigid, her eyes darting nervously between the officers and the door. "We're not abandoning you," he said quickly. "If anything, we need your voice more than ever." She hesitated, looking down at her child, who was still holding on to her leg. "You don't understand," she said, her voice low but insistent. "They won't listen to you. They'll see you as the enemy. The uniforms, they don't see the person behind them." Jake gulped, feeling the truth of her words wrap around him tightly. "Then let us show them another way," he urged. "Help us help you. We want to protect you, not intimidate you." "I don't want my son to see violence," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. The little boy pressed against her, sensing the shift in their conversation. Heavy footsteps approached, more officers filtering into the room, their faces set with urgency. A hush fell over the crowd, the air heavy with anticipation. Jake, desperate to focus on more than just fear, turned to his colleagues. "We need to establish a presence down there. But we do it together. As a unified front. We don't act as police. We act as community members." Angela nodded. "Yes. We start by being transparent. We need to communicate what we're doing, both to the people and to each other." "We can take a few of those outreach officers," came another voice. "They already know some folks down there and can build trust." Jake turned his gaze back to the mother. "What do you think?" he asked gently. "Will you come with us? We need your voice loud and clear." The mother inhaled sharply, and Jake could see the battle in her eyes. Trust was hard-won, he knew that. And yet she stepped forward, taking a position that emulated the fighting spirit he'd come to admire. "If we're going to do this, let us do it right." "Then let us go," Angela said, rallying the group as they all stood straighter. Jake could feel the weight of responsibility shift again, not just on him but shared among them as a team. As they headed for the door, the buzz of voices outside grew louder. With every step, Jake felt an almost electric sense of purpose wash over him. They were moving towards something larger than the confines of their uniforms, but the unease still nestled in his gut. What awaited them outside? Would their message get through? As they spilled into the bright sunlight, panic crackled in the air. The sounds of shouting and sirens pulsed through the streets like a warning bell. "Stay close!" Jake shouted over the noise as they stepped into the fray. But as he looked at the faces around him, he realized the real battle was just beginning. They were about to find out if this fragile hope could withstand the harsh call of reality. And just then, a piercing scream erupted from a crowd in the distance, freezing them all in place. What had they walked into? Would they be able to confront the chaos ahead and emerge stronger together? The crowd surged forward like a tidal wave, voices blending into a chaotic symphony of anger and fear. Jake's heart pounded in rhythm with the sirens, their shrill cries echoing the tension that electrified the air. He could see people pushing against police barricades, their faces painted with frustration and desperation. "Follow my lead," Angela shouted, her voice barely cutting through the din. With a quick glance at the mother by his side, Jake felt her grip tighten on her son's hand. Raw determination glimmered in her eyes, but fear still loomed. The officers shuffled into formation, keeping close together while trying to maintain distance from the thrumming energy of the crowd. Jake took a deep breath and raised his hand. "We're here to listen," he called out, projecting as best he could. "Let us talk." But all he got in response were a flurry of shouts. "Get out of here. You're not welcome. You think you can help us?" The words cut deep. Shades of doubt began to creep into Jake's mind. They wanted to be the bridge, but the chasm felt impossibly wide. Angela shot him a glance, a hint of worry reflected back at him. They were a long way from the dialogue they had just started. "We'll set up a space to talk," Angela shouted again, firm and resolute. "Let us create a platform up ahead where people can come and share." Jake glanced at the mother. She was trembling slightly, but her chin was held high, fierce resolve etched on her face. "That's a good idea," she said, her voice steadying. "They need to feel heard. They want to know someone is actually listening." But the chaotic uproar wasn't in a mood to pause. Just then, amidst the clamor of voices, he caught sight of a figure emerging from the jostling mass. A woman with flowing hair and a determined stride stepped forward, her presence radiating strength. A hush fell over the crowd as she reached the front. Jake's heart quickened. Was this the moment they had been waiting for, a sign that their approach could work? "We don't need another lecture," the woman shouted, her voice commanding but filled with emotion. "We need change. We need accountability. So why should we trust you?" The question pierced the air, and Jake sensed the apprehension from both sides. "Because we're here for you," he called back, a tremor of urgency in his voice. "We are willing to listen and learn. But we need you to meet us at the table. What do you want us to hear?" The crowd shifted slightly upon hearing his plea, the tension hanging thick and undeniable. The woman narrowed her eyes, sizing him up. "What can you do? Show us you understand our pain. Prove it." Jake felt a wave of desperation mingle with a rising courage. "Then let us start with transparency. Let us talk about the issues that matter most to you." Suddenly, the woman's expression softened. "I'll give you a chance, but it's not just about talking. It's time for action. We need to see real results." Her words seemed to resonate, waves of agreement rippling through the crowd. Jake turned to Angela, who nodded, realizing this was the moment. "All right," she said, gathering her team around her. "We'll work together, hand in hand. But trust goes both ways." As murmurs spread among the crowd, Jake's eyes caught the little boy watching anxiously. He felt his heart tighten. This child deserved to grow up knowing they could trust he was determined to fight for that. The electricity in the air shifted slightly, not entirely dissipated but transformed into something more constructive. As they began to hash out terms, Jake noticed a lightening of the mood, but in the back of his mind, a nagging thought persisted: was it too late to bridge the gap? Just then, amid the discussions, a gunshot echoed through the streets, the sound reverberating like thunder. The crowd gasped in unison, and Jake felt the world narrow into focus. What would happen next? Would all their efforts be consumed by chaos? The sound of gunfire shattered the already fragile atmosphere, slicing through the tension thick as fog. Jake's heart dropped. For a fleeting moment, time froze, people froze. A collective gasp echoed through the crowd, faces blanched in disbelief, eyes darting in confusion. It felt like a nightmare, a cruel twist as chaos threatened to erupt once again. Angela instinctively moved closer to Jake, fear etched across her features. The mother, still gripping her son's hand, pulled him tight against her, shielding him from the madness that seemed poised to swallow them whole. "Everyone, stay down!" Jake shouted, his voice rising above the chaos. "Stay calm." But calm was a distant memory as screams rippled through the throng. Some people were backing away, others were shouting frantically, and a few were pushing forward as if to confront the unknown. The tension in the air was palpable, an ominous cloud of dread swirling over them. Jake felt the panic rising in his throat. This was how it was supposed to go. They were supposed to bridge the divide, not reinforce it. "Everyone, please." Angela's voice broke through the chaos, firm and unwavering. "We need to form a barrier around the children, keep them safe." That seemed to resonate. People started to gather, instinctively drawing closer to the small boy, forming a protective circle. Jake could see the little one, eyes wide and innocent, glancing around in confusion. This was a world he shouldn't have to navigate, a world tinged with fear and violence. The crowd was still restless, uncertainty woven into their anxious murmurs. The woman who had first confronted Jake stepped forward again, her expression fierce. "Who fired that shot?" she demanded. "Was it you? Was it the cops?" "No." Jake shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Nobody knows. But we can't let this moment define us. We need to focus on protecting each other, on working together." The woman didn't falter. Her gaze stayed locked on him, it was as if she dared him to prove himself. "Then show us," she said. "Show us that you mean it." Jake's mind raced. What did that mean? How could they show strength when everything around them threatened to unravel? Taking a deep breath, he looked around at the terrified faces, the hopeful spark in the little boy's eyes. "We can organize. We'll create committees for dialogue, for safety. Let us turn this anger into something constructive. Let us channel it." As he spoke, Jake felt something change in the air. People began lifting their heads, some nodding, others murmuring in agreement. "Yes. We need change." Someone shouted from the back. "Real change." Another voice chimed in, the tension still lingered, but there was a spark, a small flicker of hope beginning to grow from the ashes of chaos. Perhaps this was their chance to take the anger fueling the crowd and transform it into something that could lead to a real movement, but just then, sirens blared closer, an approaching army of flashing lights cutting through the night. Jake's heart sank anew. Would the officers see this gathering as a threat? Would they make matters worse? What would that mean for the fragile progress they had made? "Get ready!" Angela shouted, urging everyone to stand their ground, but uncertainty hung over them like a cloudy storm, ready to unleash its fury at any moment. That charged silence hanging over them, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something far greater than he had anticipated. The true test of their resolve loomed ahead, and as anxiety crept back in, one question resounded in his mind: could they face the storm together? The sirens painted the night with a sudden urgency, their warbling wails merging with the rising voices. Jake felt the swirling tide of panic threaten to pull him under, yet he forced himself to breathe deeply. He couldn't let fear take over. He knew they were on the brink of something pivotal, but the looming arrival of the police felt like a boulder rolling downhill. The inevitable crash seemed unavoidable. "Stand strong," Angela urged, her voice cutting through the noise. She squeezed the hand of the little boy beside her, drawing strength from the innocent gaze that sought comfort amid the chaos. "Jake!" someone shouted from behind him. It was Carlos, his neighbor from a few streets over, sweat glistening on his forehead. "What's your plan? We can't just wait for them to show up." Jake glanced at the masses around him. All eyes were waiting for guidance, searching for a glimmer of hope through the fear. "We need to show them we're united," he called out. "If we stand together, they'll see that we're not here to cause trouble. We're here for dialogue, for peace." "Dialogue?" the fierce woman interjected again, her arms crossed. "They won't listen to words. They never have." Behind her, murmurs spread through the crowd. Doubt, that unwelcome guest, crept amongst them. Jake felt the weight of leadership settle on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. "Maybe not," he said, trying to sound steady. "But throwing rocks and taunting them isn't going to change hearts. We need to show them we're here for each other." The air shifted slightly. He began to sense a wavering confidence, a flickering of trust. "Think about it. If we can hold our ground with calm, we'll show everyone that we won't be intimidated." He looked at each face, locking eyes with them one by one. They were scared, yes, but there was a fire underneath that fear, a shared desperation for change. In the distance, red and blue lights pulsed against the darkness, illuminating the worried faces of the people around him. "We're standing for something bigger than ourselves, right?" Jake asked, voice rising above the murmurs. "For our kids. For our dreams. Our community cannot be defined by the anger of a few." A murmured agreement rippled through the group, growing until shouts of support erupted. "Jake's right. We have each other." Someone yelled. Jake felt a swell of emotion rise within him. His heart drummed in his chest, the steady beat matching the resolve building around him. They were transforming fear into unity, uncertainty into strength. But just as he felt the tide turning, the sound of heavy boots echoed as police officers stepped into the clearing. "Everyone back away," came a stern voice, cutting through the collective hope like a knife. The officers formed a line, shields raised, their faces stern and unreadable. Jake's stomach turned. How had it unraveled so quickly? Had all they built in those fleeting moments been a fragile illusion? He stepped forward, hand raised to show peace. "We're not here to fight," he shouted, his voice ringing with conviction, but the officers didn't lower their guards, glancing nervously at each other, assessing the crowd. Everyone around him held their breath, anxiously awaiting the next move. Would they retreat or would the storm finally break? As tension hung thick in the air, an officer stepped forward, glancing directly at Jake. He had a look of familiarity, a rent notion of understanding that made Jake pause. Could he be the lifeline they needed? In the silence, Jake's mind raced as the officers took another step forward. He had to act. "Listen," he said, voice steady. "We need to talk. We're all on the same side if we choose to be." But just then, to everyone's shock, a familiar voice called from behind the police line, making Jake freeze in disbelief. There she was, the chief, a black woman of undeniable presence and authority, stepping forward as a beacon amid the chaos. "Hold on," she shouted, her voice ringing clear. "What's happening here?" The crowd, caught between fear and curiosity, turned to her, questions bubbling to the surface. Jake's stomach nodded. What did this mean for them? Would she heed their call, or add fuel to the fire? As all eyes turned toward the chief, one nagging thought haunted him: could her arrival change their fate or merely add another layer to the storm? The chief stood tall, her presence commanding the attention of both cops and protesters alike. A flicker of recognition sparked in Jake's mind. He had seen her at community meetings, advocating for justice, pushing for change. But this was different. Would she stand with them now? He watched her face, searching for any sign of empathy. As she surveyed the gathered crowd, her expression shifted from caution to contemplation. The night was thick with tension, like the air before a storm. "I need to know what is going on here," she said, her voice steady, though Jake could sense a tremor, a hint of vulnerability beneath the surface. "Chief!" Jake called out, finding his voice amidst the clamor. "We're here for dialogue. We want to be heard, not feared. We're just trying to stand together, to demand our right to safety and respect." The murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd once more, emboldened by the chief's unexpected presence. "Respect is a two-way street," she replied, stepping closer, softening as she looked into the eyes of those gathered. It felt like the ground beneath them shifted. "I know that. And I want to listen. But you need to help me understand what you're fighting for tonight." "Justice," someone shouted, and another voice quickly added, "equality." The words filled the air, resonating with passion and a lingering hope. Jake took a breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle around them. "Then let us talk," the chief instructed, holding her gaze steady. A flicker of tension abated, replaced by a cautious optimism. It was like a dam had started to crack, letting light seep through. But just as relief washed over the crowd, the sound of shouting erupted from the fringes. A group pushed forward, their anger palpable. "What is going on?" one of them yelled, fists raised, eyes smoldering. "Are you just going to let them off the hook?" Jake's heart sank. The tension was rising again, threatening to derail what they had just built. "No, don't engage," he pleaded, stepping between the chief and the angry voices. "This is our moment to be heard." But the chief raised her hand, gaining everyone's attention. "Wait. Before we go any further, I need to establish some ground rules. I want to hear you, but we must keep this civil. If we want change, we can't allow anger to take over." Her words hung in the air, heavy yet hopeful. There was power in her proposition, a shared understanding that perhaps, for the first time, they could strike a balance, the police and the community, together. With every eye on her, she continued, "I am committed to understanding your struggles. Let us do this together. Let us find a way to change our narrative." Jake felt hearts racing beside him, hope igniting in the eyes of many. But in the shadows, doubt loomed. Would this moment of connection hold? The standoff felt like a tightrope walk. The crowd's reaction was loud, some cheering, others still uncertain, hesitant. Jake looked to the faces of his neighbors, Angela's resolve, Carlos's conviction. They needed to take this opportunity. "Can we do it?" Jake asked the group. "Can we speak up? Can we finally be heard?" A resounding cheer erupted, but the anger from the edge of the crowd pulsed louder, eager to disrupt. All eyes shifted again as the shouting grew closer. Jake tensed, knowing that any spark could set off a fire. "Stay in control," the chief barked, her authority weighing in amidst the noise. But would her presence be enough to bridge the chasm? Just then, from the back of the line, a young officer broke ranks, hesitantly stepping toward Jake, eyes wide. "I agree with you," he shouted, his voice struggling over the din. "We're all human." Everyone froze, taken aback by this surprising assertion amidst the chaos. Jake's heartbeat quickened. Had the moment of change finally arrived? Or would it all slip through their fingers? He held his breath, the tension tightening like a fist, as all eyes shifted toward the young officer. How far would they be willing to go for connection, for understanding? Would alliances be formed, or would the wave of anger drown them? All. The crowd fell silent, the young officer's declaration hanging in the air like a delicate thread. Jake could feel the collective breath of the gathering, held tightly in anticipation. The palpable tension shifted as faces turned from hostility to curiosity. What if this was the spark they needed? "Listen," Jake urged, his voice breaking through the stillness. "This is what we've been saying. We're all in this together. We want to understand each other. The young officer nodded, stepping a little closer, his shoulders relaxing. I've seen how our community really feels. We can't ignore it. I want to be part of the solution. The chief's gaze softened. And that's the beginning. We must acknowledge our shared humanity. Her words dripped with sincerity, and Jake saw the power of their moment deepen. But even as she tried to offer solace, the angry voices surged again from the outer edges. Enough of this. Someone shouted. You can't just change things overnight. The chief raised her voice to be heard. This is not just about changing laws. It's about changing hearts and minds. A flicker of hope burst through Jake's heart, but he could see that not everyone felt it. Tensions run high, the anxiety simmering just beneath the surface. It was a fragile peace, and one wrong move could break it. Jake's mind raced. We can have a discussion. Let those who have questions let them express their anger. It needs to be heard too. The chief nodded. But let us do it respectfully. She looked around, scanning the crowd, her eyes lingering on the faces filled with uncertainty. If we can keep this civil, I promise to listen. Change does not happen in silence. Slowly, a hand raised from the angry group, a woman with defiance etched across her features. How do we know this isn't just talk? How do we trust you? The chief took a step forward, her voice steady, even fierce. You don't have to trust me right now. Trust must be earned, and I'm willing to put in the work. What's your name? Leah, the woman responded, her voice trailing off, caught off guard by the chief's directness. Leah, thank you for sharing your truth. Let us find a way to earn that trust. The chief glanced around, inviting others to join in. Who else feels the same way? Within the crowd, hands began to rise, voices cracking with emotion and uncertainty. One by one, people began to speak, sharing their frustrations, their stories, and hopes. Jake didn't miss the young officer's eyes shining with conviction. Perhaps this was real. As the night wore on, conversations flowed like water. There were tears, laughter, and unexpected revelations. The barriers once erected by fear and anger were beginning to crumble. Even those whispers of dissent faded, replaced by an eagerness to understand, but as Jake glanced around, he still sensed a looming shadow. A group remained tight-lipped in the corner, their glares cutting through the atmosphere, refusing to let go of their anger. What about the accountability? One shouted, voice dripping with skepticism. What are you all actually going to do about it? The chief's expression hardened slightly, but only for a moment. Accountability is crucial. If you give me the chance, I'll show you. Hope and doubt tangled in the air. Was this just a moment, or the beginning of something bigger? As the moon rose higher, illuminating the square, Jake's heart raced with both excitement and fear. The night felt transformative, yet he still felt the heavy weight of the unknown looming in their future. What could this newfound dialogue lead to in days ahead? Would the voices intersect, or would they ultimately clash? With every voice that spoke, they edged closer to clarity. But there were still unresolved tensions waiting in the shadows, eager to disrupt their fragile progress. Would the moment of unity be enough to withstand the storm that was surely brewing? The moon hung high, its pale glow illuminating the faces gathered in the square, a mixture of trepidation and hope dancing in their eyes. Jake felt the weight of the night pressing down upon him. This was the moment of truth, just as Angela had envisioned, and he could sense it rippling through the crowd. But they were still so precariously balanced on the edge of a knife one misstep could plunge them back into chaos. Jake took a steadying breath, adrenaline surging through his veins. The room was still buzzing with voices, and the chief's presence served as a calm in the eye of their storm. Let us make it clear, the chief said, her tone resolute yet nurturing. Tonight, we begin a new chapter together. My job is to hold us accountable, but it's your responsibility, too. We're all in this together. A ripple of agreement washed over the crowd, but Jake could still feel the skepticism simmering. Leah, the earlier dissenting voice, stepped forward again. For so long, this has been talk. For once, we want action. We're tired of empty promises. Understanding his moment had arrived, Jake took a step forward. We'll hold each other accountable, Leah, he said firmly, locking eyes with her. We know we have to earn that trust back step by step. The shift in the crowd was palpable. The nervous energy he had felt earlier receded slightly, replaced by something almost tangible, a shared determination to make this moment count. Let us talk about what we need, Jake said, gesturing to the crowd. What actions do you believe are essential? Among the throng, voices began to rise, echoing off the buildings that stood witness to this pivotal night. Community policing, shouted a man in the back. We need transparency. Training. Cultural education. Yes. Someone else called. Police must actively participate in our community events, not just stand on the sidelines. Angela took a step closer, her eyes blazing with conviction. Exactly. We'll create programs to bring us all together, forums, workshops, and action plans that include every one of you. More hands shot up, nodding eagerly. They were hungry for collaboration, not confrontation, a hunger that Jake had missed in the days leading to this moment. It was that spark of hope, that burning desire for change that, perhaps, could indeed reshape their tiny town's identity for the better. The chief smiled, her presence radiating warmth. Let us work together to design these initiatives. I want to set up a community advisory board, a group made up of officers and citizens alike, to ensure we're not just talking, but taking actionable steps forward. Cheers erupted, mingling with the sound of newfound excitement. Leah stepped back, caught up in this wave of inspiration. Was it possible? Could they really move past the pain and rage of the past? It felt like the foundation was shaking beneath them, but maybe this time it was a good thing. Rather than destruction, it would build something stronger. In the midst of their fervent discussion, the little boy, clutching his mother's leg, looked up at Jake with wide eyes. Are we safe now? He asked, his innocent question piercing through the fervor of adulthood. Jake knelt down, meeting the boy's gaze with an earnest smile. We're trying really hard to make it safe for you, and for everyone. That's what tonight is all about, he assured, his own heart swelling with the promise of a brighter future. The boy's mother stepped forward, her voice softer now but filled with resolve. What happens next is important, she said. We need the action, not just the words. I know, Jake replied. It will take time, but we'll keep moving forward. The chief and I will be your allies. Already, he sensed the walls shifting. Jake stood, absorbing the energy around him. A transformative light seemed to illuminate the conversations brewing, casting warmth over the cautious hearts as they began to interweave hope with commitment. They were people of their community, sharing their struggles and visions together, but in his heart, he felt the ghosts of doubt still lingering, whispering fears of falling short. They had just begun to spark a change, and the road ahead was uncertain. But he knew one thing: if they continued to unify, to push for true equity, they could withstand anything that emerged from behind the shadows. As they all echoed their hopes in a chorus, it felt like a mile marker in their journey. A truth was forming, and it held power. Jake glanced at Angela, who stood tall beside him, strength shining in her gaze. This was about more than just them, it was about their entire community, about inching forward together, not just as officers or civilians, but as a family, and in this spirit of togetherness, Jake grasped the hands of those standing near him, feeling the intertwined hopes growing into something that could transform not just their department but their beloved town as well. They were all part of something bigger, and as they united in that moment, sparks kindled into flames of change. With renewed determination, Jake turned back to the crowd. Together, let's South make this place proud. Let us become the change we've been waiting for by standing united. Cheers erupted again, real and relentless, carrying through the night into the hearts of every person gathered. As the moon looked down upon them, a new sense of hope had bloomed in their small town, one all could hold on to. Change wasn't just a wish anymore, it was a mission born of collaboration, a vivid promise lighting the path they would forge together, and just like that, the storm clouds began to part. Hope rose within every heart present, signaling the dawn of a new tomorrow. Now, my dear friends, if you felt the power of this transformation, if it resonated deep within you, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for the journey ahead, so don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this story of hope and change. Leave a like right now to feed the algorithm. Every bit counts. And I want to hear from you. Comment below your reactions and feelings about this ending. Let's keep the conversation going.